We made it out, all three of us, and it was in the cold outside my burning east wing, watching smoke rise into a sky that didn't care about any of it, that I finally asked Fola the question I should have asked the very first night. Who is doing this? Give me a name. She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked less like a woman guarding a secret and more like a woman finally deciding she was tired of carrying it alone. His name is Sung-ho, she said, and you already know him. You've known him almost your whole life. I want you to understand what that name did to me before I explain who he was, because the sound of it hit me somewhere older than fear, somewhere underneath every wall I've spent 20 years building. Kang Sung-ho was my mother's closest friend before I was even born. He was the man who taught me how to hold a gun the first time, the man who stood beside me at my mother's funeral when I was 19 years old and told me that grief, in our world, either destroys you or it forges you, and that he would make sure it forged me. I called him uncle for most of my life. I trusted him with things I never told another living soul. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 years. Not since a disagreement over territory that I told myself was purely business, the kind of falling out that happens in this life and means nothing personal underneath it. I was wrong about that, too. Everything that week was teaching me how wrong I had been about almost everything. He was there, Fola said, the night your mother and Amara's grandmother made the arrangement that led to all of this, decades before either of you was born. He was there when the bloodline was first protected, and he was there when it was betrayed. He didn't lose someone to that betrayal, Deo. He caused it. And for 30 years he has been trying to erase every child born from that crossing before they're old enough to understand what they carry, because as long as they exist, the truth of what he did exists with them. You're telling me the man who taught me to survive in this life is the same man trying to kill my daughter? I'm telling you, Fola said, that he orphaned her the first time. The rain, the warehouse, all of it. He's the reason she was alone that night. Not an accident. A calculated risk, because he believed a child abandoned to the elements would simply die without anyone ever having to answer for it. He didn't count on you. I stood there in the ash and the cold, and I felt something in me go very quiet. The way the city goes quiet right before a war starts, and I understood, finally, fully, what the next chapter of my life was going to require of me. That night, once the fires had been put out and Amara was finally asleep in a temporary room in the West Wing, I sat outside her door for hours, turning Fola's words over and over in my mind. Sung-ho, the man who taught me to hold a gun, the man who told me grief either destroys you or forges you. I kept waiting to feel surprised by the betrayal, the way I had with Rosha, and instead I only felt a slow, cold certainty settling into place, like a lock finally finding the key that had always fitted. Fola found me there near dawn, sitting against the wall with my head in my hands. You're going after him, she said. It wasn't a question. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, she said. You could stay, build higher walls, hire more men. Let him come to you on ground you control, instead of walking into whatever trap he's already built for you out there. And how many more nights like tonight do I let him have? I said, how many more men do I bury because I was too careful to end this the right way? I watched that man teach me everything I know about surviving in this world. I am done letting him decide when Amara gets to stop being afraid. Fola sat down beside me, and for a long moment neither of us said anything. My sister used to say something, she finally offered. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing the person you love over the fear anyway. She sounds like she was wiser than both of us. She was, Fola said quietly. I miss her every single day, and I will not lose her daughter the same way I lost her. If you felt that twist land the way I did the night I heard it, tell me in the comments. Type, I felt that, if you didn't see Sung-ho coming. I found him 4 days later, in a warehouse not unlike the one where I'd found Amara, which I don't believe was a coincidence, because men like Sung-ho enjoy irony almost as much as they enjoy power. He looked older than I remembered, tired, in a way that surprised me, like 30 years of covering a single lie had finally caught up to the architecture of his face. You came alone, he said when I walked in. Not a question, an observation, delivered the way he used to deliver every observation to me when I was young enough to think his approval was something worth earning. I came for the truth, I said. You already know that. You've known it since the night you sent men to my house. I sent men to end a threat that should have ended 30 years ago, he said. You don't understand what that child will become if she's allowed to grow into what she is. You don't understand what it will cost this city, this world, when people like her stop needing warning and start needing nothing at all from men like us. She's a baby, I said, and I felt my voice break in a way I hadn't allowed it to break in front of anyone since my mother's funeral. She's not a threat. She's not a prophecy. She's my daughter. She was never meant to be your daughter, Sung-ho said, and something in his voice cracked too, something old and buried and furious all at once. She was meant to be erased before anyone had the chance to love her enough to protect her. That was the entire plan. And then you found her in the rain. And you ruined 30 years of careful work in one night, because you couldn't walk past a crying child the way any sensible man would have. Good, I said. I hope it haunts you exactly as much as it should. You don't understand what's coming for her, he said. And for a moment, the old man I remembered flickered through, the one who used to sit with me after my mother's funeral and tell me the world only respects the men willing to make the hard choice. There are others like me, Deo, older than me, more patient than me. I was sent to end this quietly, before it grew into something no single man could contain. If I fail here tonight, they won't send one man next time. They'll send everything they have. Then let them come, I said. I buried my mother. I buried the boy I used to be, the one who thought you were worth calling family. I am done being afraid of what's coming for her, because everything that's ever come for her has had to go through me first, and it has failed every single time. Not every time, Sung-ho said quietly. Not the first time. I made sure of that myself. That was the moment something in me went past anger, past grief, into a stillness I hadn't felt since the night I found her in the rain. Then I suppose, I said, you should have known better than to leave her somewhere a man like me might hear her crying. Before I left that warehouse, I asked him the one question that had been sitting under my ribs since the night Fola first said his name. Did you know my mother would have hated what you became? For a moment, something flickered across his face that looked almost like grief. Your mother made a promise to a family she barely knew, out of a kindness that got her killed for it years later, he said slowly. I have spent 30 years making sure that promise didn't cost anyone else what it cost her. You can call that villainy if it helps you sleep tonight. I call it the only apology I know how to give. There's nothing about tonight that will help me sleep, I told him. But I imagine that's true for both of us now. I'm not going to walk you through every second of what happened next in that warehouse. I'll tell you it was ugly, that it involved every year of training I've ever had and every ounce of restraint I didn't know I still possessed. I'll tell you that it ended with Sung-ho alive, because some part of me, the part that still remembers a 19-year-old boy standing at his mother's grave, couldn't finish what my hands wanted to finish. I'll tell you that he escaped through a door I should have covered, into a night I should have controlled better, and that as he ran, he turned back once and said the only thing that has kept me awake more nights since than almost anything else in this story. This isn't over, Deo. It was never going to be over the moment you picked her up out of that rain. You didn't save her. You delayed the ending. And endings like this one always find their way back around. If you think Deo made the right choice letting him live, comment protect her below. I want to know if you'd have made the same call. I walked out of that warehouse that night with my hands shaking in a way they hadn't shaken since I was young enough to still be afraid of my own father. Fola was waiting outside, leaning against the car, and when she saw my face, she didn't ask what happened. She already knew. You let him go, she said. I let him go, I confirmed. Why? I thought about that question longer than I've thought about almost anything in my life. Because if I become the kind of man who finishes what he started tonight, I finally said, I'm not sure I'll still be the kind of man Amara needs standing over her crib when she wakes up screaming. I've spent my whole life deciding that ending things was the only language that mattered. I don't want that to be the only thing I teach her. Fola didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. My sister would have liked you, she said. That's not something I say lightly. We drove home in silence after that, and I remember looking down at Amara, asleep in her car's seat, utterly unaware of the war that had just been fought in her name, and feeling something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt since before I found her in the rain. Not peace. I don't think peace is something men like me get to keep for very long, but something close to it. Something worth protecting. Amara is 11 months old now. She still doesn't have full words, still points at hallways and doors and empty corners of rooms that make my men reach for their weapons before they even understand why. Fola stays with us most nights now, in a wing of the house we rebuilt after the fire, and Rosha has not been seen in this city since the night I let him walk out of it. Some nights I still wonder if I made the right choice, letting both of them live. Rosha, who betrayed us out of debt and desperation. Sung-ho, who orphaned her out of 30 years of buried guilt disguised as duty. I used to believe mercy was a weakness I couldn't afford. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I think mercy, for me, has become its own kind of armor. Proof, even to myself, that everything I'm building around her is worth more than the man I used to be before she existed in my life. Last night, I stood over her crib the way I have almost every night since I found her, watching her sleep, watching her small chest rise and fall with a peace I still don't fully believe she's earned yet, not in a world like ours. Fola found me there, the way she often does now, and stood beside me in silence for a long while before she spoke. "She's going to ask you one day," Fola said, "why the world came for her before she was even old enough to understand it was happening. What are you going to tell her?" I thought about that question longer than I've thought about almost anything since the night I found her in the rain. "I'm going to tell her the truth," I finally said. "That she was born into something bigger than either of us understands yet. That people feared her before they ever met her. And that none of it mattered, in the end, because I would have burned this entire city to the ground before I let any of them take her from me." "That's not really an answer," Fola said, smiling for the first time in what felt like weeks. "No," I agreed. "But it's the only one I have that's true. I don't know what Amara is going to become. I don't fully understand what she already is. But I know this. The night I found her in the rain, I told myself I don't save people, I end them. I was wrong about that. I've spent my whole life being very good at ending things. What I didn't know, standing in that warehouse with a screaming newborn in my arms, was that I was about to become someone whose entire life was built around beginning one. Instead, she was never abandoned. She was sent. And it took me 10 months, a war, and a name I never wanted to hear again, to understand that I wasn't her rescuer at all. I was her assignment. And Sung-ho is still out there. Which means this story, our story, isn't finished yet. If you want to see what happens when Amara's abilities grow beyond anything even Fola can explain, subscribe now, because part 3 is coming, and it's the chapter where everything we think we understand about her gift gets turned upside down. She didn't warn us this time. She hunted. That's the only way I know how to describe what my daughter did on a Tuesday afternoon, in a hallway she had walked 1,000 times before, when she stopped mid-step, turned completely away from her toys, and walked. Walked, not crawled, not pointed, walked, straight toward a closet door none of my men had checked in over a week. Inside that closet was a man who had been hiding in my house for 4 days.